This episode is brought to you by Anytime Fitness. We may talk a whole lot about sports, but when it comes to keeping fit ourselves, there's definitely room for improvement. I hit this point early July. I was just like, I am not in good enough shape. I started trying to walk at least 15,000 steps a day or hiking or just anything to keep my legs moving. Now it's the end of 2023. I feel great. I had a physical 3 weeks ago, and the guy was like, "You're doing great. You're doing better than you were 3 years ago." I felt great. Whatever your goals are, progress is possible thanks to Anytime Fitness. Get a personalized plan and support from an expert coach anytime, anywhere. Visit anytimefitness.com to try Anytime Fitness for free. Start to train for your life. Terms, conditions, and restrictions apply. See website for details. This episode is brought to you by Atlassian. Atlassian software like Jira, Confluence, and Trello help power global collaboration for all teams so they can accomplish everything that's impossible alone. Because individually we're great, but together we're so much better. Learn how to unleash the potential of your team at Atlassian.com. Atlassian.com. Atlassian. Tap the banner or visit this episode's page to learn more.
Welcome back to Through the Ringer. I am your host, Tate Frazier, and boy, oh boy, do we have a jam-packed show today. First up, we're going to talk NBA with the Ringer's very own Rob Mahoney. He's going to break down what we've seen so far in the play-in, forecast some matchups in the playoffs. That's going to be a lot of fun. We're also going to have the Ringer's Ben Solak come on. He's going to break down his 100% correct, you heard me right, 100% correct mock draft and forecast what's ahead as we look ahead to the NFL draft. That's going to be fun. And finally, we're going to have some real fun, some prop culture. We're going to have Lathan from Higher Learning come on the show. We're going to talk about who actually is a part of the succession plan on Succession and some, NBA drama that's going on Twitter right now. So we got a jam-packed show for you. We're excited to get into it. Now let's go right now to the Ringer's very own Rob Mahoney. All right, we're back on Through the Ringer, and now we are joined by the Ringer's Rob Mahoney, a man who has kept us up to date on all things play-in, playoffs, NBA regular season themes, all the above. Rob, thanks so much for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, of course, anytime.
Well, we're going to be talking a lot as the playoffs get going, obviously, and you know this. And we got a lot of conversations because anytime, we're in Los Angeles here, anytime the Lakers play, there's a lot of drama, there's a lot of conversation. And in the play-in game against the Minnesota Timberwolves, they're obviously down at halftime. Karl Towns is playing an amazing game. He's the talk of the town, right? Everyone's like, look how amazing he looks. The Timberwolves are going to make this happen without Rudy Gobert. We get to the second half. Schroeder hits a big shot. Anthony Davis has an inexplicable foul. So I wanted to start there with you. What was your initial reaction when you saw that happen in real time? Because I thought that was like a snapshot moment of kind of this Lakers season where it's just confounding, right? It just makes no sense.
I mean, it was a perfect intersection of the Lakers' weird season, of the Wolves' weird season, right, into a completely ugly and riveting but kind of unwatchable game in which all of these really talented players are just making mistakes all over the place. And that's honestly kind of where the Lakers are. They are a team that needs to win ugly in a lot of cases. They don't have overwhelming firepower. They don't have a half-court offense that's going to, bring you to basketball nirvana. They have LeBron James, and they have Anthony Davis, and they have a supporting cast that's good enough to give them a puncher's chance in a game like this, and I guess we'll see in a playoff series against the Grizzlies.
Yeah, I love that after the game, they cut back to the studio and Ernie Johnson goes, "Are you not entertained?" And Barkley's like, "I was not entertained. That was actually an ugly basketball game." I like that, that honesty. Obviously, that's what we expect from Chuck a little bit. But in general, that game, like you said, it was a bit of a mess. But the good news, if you're an LA fan, is you survive. I mean, Schroeder hit a big shot late. I liked after the game, LeBron was like, AD almost messed up his big shot. He basically blew it for him. The accountability of this team, it does seem like there's more of that with this new Lakers group, right? Or am I buying a little bit too much into a play-in win?
No, I don't think you're buying too much into it at all. I mean, if you flash back to, especially around Christmas time, the Lakers, every post game was just a dirge, right? It was people side-eyeing at each other, a complete lack of the accountability you're talking about, even though that one's kind of in a joking way, putting AD on the spot there. But there's something to that, right? There's something to the fact that this is a team that they do hold each other accountable. And most importantly, now they're deep enough to where if you are having a bad game, if you're D'Angelo Russell having a rough night, it's okay. Dennis Schroeder's going to come in. He's going to hit the big shot in your place. You can have a collective sense of that accountability and the ability to kind of prop each other up in the process.
Yeah, and I like Hachimura off the bench last night. I thought he had a really solid game. I thought him and Schroeder actually helped flip the game for the Lakers, which there's a little bit of an irony in that, and that's what they've been looking for, some of that depth. So now as we forecast to the future, we have a matchup that Dylan Brooks said he wanted. He said, quote, "I wouldn't mind playing LeBron and would like to knock them out right away in the first round." And now we have that matchup. We have the Grizzlies, who finished second in the West, obviously record-wise, but now they're the sixth best odds to win the West. So they obviously feel like a little bit disrespected there. I've seen some comments about, how their feelings on the way that people perceive them. And now they're facing a Lakers team that has become kind of the hot pick out of the West. What do you see in this matchup, and what can we expect in this matchup between, LeBron's Lakers versus this Grizzlies team?
I mean, it definitely seems like the preferable of the options for the Lakers, right? If you're going to choose between the Grizzlies and the Nuggets, who was the other option on the board if they had fallen into the 8th seed, this is what you would prefer. But it's probably not a good enough matchup for the Lakers to actually win. It's good enough for it to be close. And a lot of that has to do with some of the equalizing factors here. Beyond the Lakers playing really well, no Steven Adams for the Grizzlies. He's been out with a PCL injury. No Brandon Clark for the Grizzlies, who's been out for a long time now with an Achilles injury. That means we're going to get a lot of what might be the juiciest one-on-one matchup in the first round. Jaren Jackson Jr., maybe the Defensive Player of the Year. Anthony Davis, who's had an incredible second half of the year. If those guys can actually stay on the floor long enough to duke it out, I think we're going to get some really great basketball out of them. Not, to say nothing of the theatrics and the kind of tertiary characters that show up sideline in Staples and things like that. Sorry, sideline at Crypto.com Arena and things like that.
I appreciate you correcting that for everyone at home so they can stay up to date on what we got going out here in Los Angeles. A little ridiculous, but I like what you said there. I mean, Jaren Jackson Jr., Anthony Davis. When Anthony Davis is healthy, he is one of the best, if not the best, rim protectors. You're talking about Brook Lopez, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and then you're talking about a Jaren Jackson Jr., right? They're all kind of, maybe Evan Mobley's in that group as well, but there's a class of rim protection that is elite, and we could see that in this series. There's also a guy that I think is under the radar that just got boosted up from the G League, who scored 42 points in the final regular season game. What about Kenny Lofton Jr.? Is there a chance we get like a little Zebo, like mini Zebo redemption in the series where he's like a nice little X factor for the Grizzlies? Because I kind of buy into that.
Honestly, I would love it. Kenny Lofton Jr. is like an NBA nerd's dream, certainly a college basketball nerd's dream.
That's me. I'm in love with this man. I'm like, but how is he not on a team? How is he not a lottery pick?
This is where we meet, on Kenny Lofton Jr. And I think there is some possibility, more than most, just because Taylor Jenkins, the Grizzlies coach, does go deeper into his bench than basically any other coach out there. So the idea that he could get rolled out in a game 4, just like a let's see what you got because Xavier Tillman isn't cutting it tonight, I'm not ruling it out. I think we're going to focus more on the stars, and especially on the Lakers side. Like, that's going to be the contrast here. The Grizzlies, even with their injury situation, are going to be a deeper team. The Lakers, as we saw against the Wolves, they needed like 88 combined minutes from AD and LeBron in that game. I know it went to overtime, but that's kind of what the formula is a lot of LeBron, a lot of AD. They're going to have to be on the floor for a ton of minutes, a ton of time, a ton of leverage. We'll see if LeBron and his foot are up for that. We'll see if AD at this point is up for that in the season. These guys have been sprinting to the finish to get here. Who could blame them if they were a little out of gas against a team as energetic and chaotic sometimes as the Grizzlies?
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure on the LeBron of foot doctors to see if his work is going to hold up in the playoffs. Everyone's going to keep an eye on that. Speaking of stars, I think this is obviously the most star-studded first-round series in the West. We're talking, of course, about the LA Clippers, the Phoenix Suns. Podcast P said he might be back in the middle of this series. We're not sure, but we're keeping an eye on that. In general, Russell Westbrook, Kevin Durant, right? We got all the names in this series. But as far as the basketball, what do you expect to see? Because this feels like it's going to be, if not the best first-round series, surely a high-quality first-round series.
I mean, I expect to see the Suns for really the first time, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we've only seen Durant and Booker and Chris Paul on the floor for a little less than 200 minutes together so far. Nothing in NBA terms. We really have no idea how this group is going to function. Only these glimpses as KD has been kind of ramping up from various injuries. So it'd be nice to just see what they've got. Right. And the Clippers are a good test as a team who can be kind of a chameleon. Like, they have a lot of adaptable pieces. They have a lot of lineup options they can throw at the Suns. Obviously, they have Kawhi Leonard. So we're going to get, top line, a battle of incredible isolation scores, incredible one-on-one scores going at each other, whether or not Paul George plays, even if it's just Kawhi going up against Durant and Booker and those guys. But below the line, we're going to see what the Suns are. And if this is really a contender or if this is a team that is still kind of like a piece or two away.
Yeah, and the old adage or the old wisdom, like if you talk to an NBA guy from, the 90s, early 2000s, whatever it is, they're like, a team, a nucleus needs 20 games with each other. And like you said, they're under 200 minutes. So, I mean, they're going to break basketball. It's kind of funny to me with the Kevin Durant story. I felt like in Brooklyn, he weirdly tried to break basketball. That team did, where they were like, we don't need defense to win a championship, right? We can just beat you with offense. And now they have these three mid-range elite scorers and Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and himself. But they are breaking traditional wisdom of like, you need to have continuity. You need to have some connective tissue there. So if they go and win the West and get to the finals, I feel like once again, like he may have broken basketball. Like, am I reading too much into that? Because it does seem insane that they could actually make this happen.
And yet they might, right? Like this is the kind of season where no team in the West, the Nuggets, the number one seed included, have really solidified themselves as being the contender to beat. So the Suns do have a chance. They have a chance to get there. We'll see, if they do, how they match up with some of these giants out east. But this is the year to do it, right? This is the year to put that theory to the test. And the idea that, what the Suns gave up in trading for Durant in the first place is not just good players like Mikal Bridges. It's not a bunch of draft picks out the door. It's the timing, as you're saying, of that deal. And like, can this work? Making a trade for that kind of player in February, running into, really a limited window here, right? KD is at the point in his career where you have to be competitive every time out, and we're about to see if the Suns have it.
And I just want to point out, Ty Lue is a guy who went up against Kevin Durant in the finals, has worked on trying to limit Kevin Durant, knows Kevin Durant, his spots on the floor, knows what he wants to do, knows his game very well. And I think Ty Lue, he gets almost lost in the conversation sometimes when we talk about playoff coaches. But the way that he's able to expose matchups and get guys uncomfortable, make them do what they don't want to do, and especially if he knows somebody, I think the Clippers are going to be fascinating in this series, especially when you have a guy like Kawhi and potentially PG that comes back. You can throw at Kevin Durant. So I'm excited about that series. It's going to be fun in the West.
This podcast is brought to you by AT&T Fiber with All-Fi. Something tells me that the guy watching sports for 13 hours straight on Sunday, who then stays up watching the recaps of those 13 hours, then calls his friends to talk about it, is definitely going to notice that half-a-second delay.
Get AT&T Fiber with All-Fi and watch sports any time of day from anywhere in your house. Live like a gigillionaire. Limited availability in select areas. Go to att.com/hypergig to check eligibility. Coverage may require extenders at additional charge.
We have some real contenders in the Eastern Conference. One of those teams that traditionally is in the East, obviously, they lost the Miami Heat. They lost to the Hawks. The Hawks got a little bit of a situation where they showed some fortitude, right? Trae Young, tried to have a little Kobe press conference moment where he's like, we don't care about the play-in. We care about winning playoff games. I thought that was nice. Nice touch there. But what did you see from the Hawks? Are they one of those teams that, they made the Eastern Conference Finals in 2021? We've seen Trae Young, fare well in the playoffs. Are the Hawks legit? Because I like Sadiq Bey. I thought that was a nice pickup, and they look pretty good. Clint Capella had some moments defensively. Talk about rim protection. I like what I saw from the Hawks against the Heat.
Yeah, certainly a very pleasant surprise just in terms of the Hawks playing up to their ability, something they haven't really been able to do consistently this season. But you're right about Sadiq Bey. And I think we're seeing kind of two big midseason changes for them pay off. One is that trade to get Bey in the first place. The other, their midseason coaching change, hiring Quinn Snyder into that spot, because those two things to me feel like the difference between the way Atlanta locked into a spot in the playoffs, overwhelmed the Heat, a team that had historically given them a lot of trouble, and Trae in particular, a lot of trouble. The difference between that and really being forced into another must-win game with their season on the line if they had lost. It really does feel like those two moves in the middle of the season changed a lot for where Atlanta is now and allowed them to be at least a more competitive team in these contexts. Are we going to say they're going to beat the Celtics? I think that would be a little bit insane at this juncture, given Atlanta's track record. But they've put themselves in a position to prove something, which is more than I think a lot of people would have thought of them even a few months ago.
And there's also, you mentioned the Heat and teams that they give trouble. We all remember the bubble they gave Giannis fits. And I think a lot of times when you see the matchup, and obviously Giannis got his revenge when they met up the following year, but just in general, if the Heat end up slotting in there and playing the Bucks in a 1-8 matchup, is there any Pat Riley magic there? Is there any Udonis Haslem magic there where the Miami Heat make the Bucks get pushed a little bit, where they have to say, oh, wait, we're not just going to be able to cruise and sweep the first round here?
I would love to see it, but honestly, that matchup has felt different since that Giannis revenge series, right? It does feel like he evolved over the course of that, and he figured some stuff out. And this Bucks team in particular, for all of their flaws, they know how to use their size. And it's not just Giannis pounding and attacking inside. It's Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis just like bullying guys whenever they get the opportunity. And this Heat team, as we saw in the game against the Hawks, they are really small, right? Like if you can pull Bam Adebayo out of position a little bit, there's not a lot of size resistance there. I just have a hard time thinking that the Heat are going to be able to overcome something like that, even if they punch their ticket through to the playoffs.
And I like Cody Zeller offensively, running pick and roll with Jimmy Butler. I think they have a nice little, repertoire with each other. I like the way that they can kind of find each other. But like you said, for whatever reason, Cody Zeller looks 6'9" out there. Bam looks 6'9" out there. It's like that frontline size of the Bucks. I mean, as kind of like I was talking about old adages in the NBA, you need tall teams, you need bigs. They have the bigs, and it doesn't look like Miami really has the bigs to match up with them. So that'll be an interesting matchup. Speaking of interesting matchups in the East, another 4-5 matchup that I think everyone's talking about, mainly because the Cavaliers have gotten the respect of the odds makers, right? They expect the Cavs to win this series pretty handily. The New York media just caught wind of that. They are up in arms. They are, I don't know what's going to happen, but they are upset. So now we got Jalen Brunson, the Knicks, a team that everyone kind of has fallen in love with a little bit. They're the blue-collar team here. They're going to go against the Cavs. Donovan Mitchell famously wanted to go to the Knicks, or that was the rumor. Now he's in Cleveland going up against the Knicks in the playoffs. What do you see here? I'm excited to see Evan Mobley, but what is this matchup going to look like? And do we expect to see Julius Randle? Because that's another wrinkle in this series that no one really knows.
Yeah, I mean, I love the way that this matchup in particular is played out in the sense of Cleveland, this elite defensive team against the Knicks, who have been, I don't know, if you've been napping all season, fans out there, I repeat, the Knicks, an elite offensive team in the NBA right now. This is what we want out of the first round, right? Like styles make fights, these two contrasts, and a team that, to me, in Cleveland profiles to the odds makers' benefit as being a cleanly better team, right? Like this is one of the best teams in the whole NBA by point differential all season long in the Cavaliers. But this is a perfect test case for them, a perfect test case for that theory. Make them prove that by having to stop Jalen Brunson from knifing into the lane. Make Donovan Mitchell have to overcome some really solid perimeter defenders and guys like Quentin Grimes and Emmanuel Quickley. Let's see how Cleveland's bigs fare against a team that wants to fight them on the glass. And then we have the Julius Randle factor, who I would love if he could walk into this series healthy. We'll see. He's reportedly out of the boot on his foot. He's reportedly starting to participate in some parts of practice. It was kind of a nasty ankle injury that sidelined him in the first place. So we'll see kind of what he's able to do. But we know when the Knicks were healthy, when he was Julius Randle, the all-NBA version we've seen this season, that's a guy who could give the Cavs a lot of trouble. And if he's less than that, things could kind of go off the rails for them, unfortunately.
So do you think that's partially why the odds maybe are so much in the favor of Cleveland? Are they factoring in Julius Randle being out? Is he that much of a difference? Because, it's kind of the funny running joke. People like to say Julius Randle this, he's not good, yada, yada. We all remember the thumbs down thing. But like Julius Randle is a legit, number 3, number 2 guy on a top-level team. We all know he has the ability, the capability to make things happen. So is he the one that's really driving that range of difference and what the odds makers expect? Because I think that's what I read into it when I first saw it.
I thought the same. And a lot of it is just like he is such a big part of the swing piece for them. Like this is a team in the Knicks that has a pretty good bench that can kind of, batten down the hatches and make things work and try to kind of hold course until he gets back. But if we're talking about missing multiple games of a 4-5 matchup that just by the nature of its seeding is destined to be pretty close, destined to be pretty tight, you're going in with a bit of a talent disadvantage just because Cleveland has such a strong core. That's a lot to ask of the rest of this team to pick up that kind of slack. You need Randle and you need his production, right? Like you may not always agree with the way he gets his points, with the way he operates, with his, defensive attention level on possession to possession, but like you need that volume of scoring and rebounding and playmaking to make this work. And if he's going to be missing significant time, that's going to be a huge swing.
I'm just excited. We get MSG. We get Donovan Mitchell in MSG. We get Jalen Brunson. I feel like Derrick Rose walked so Jalen Brunson could fly in a playoff series for the Knicks. You know what I mean? That's what this feels like a little bit. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch that series all play out. Rob, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks for joining us. Where can the people find your work? I want to keep everyone tuned in as all this crazy playoff stuff unfolds the rest of the way.
Well, hey, find me and all of our colleagues at theringer.com. Listen to us on the Ringer NBA show. I'm on a show twice a week, group chat, Wednesdays and Sundays. Come listen along.
Yeah, can't wait. And you're going to be doing that, after the games, and it's going to be live, emergency podcasts. We love those here
Absolutely.
at The Ringer. So every single time they come out, you can go listen. That is NBA Group Chat. Great show. Appreciate you coming on the show, Rob. It's been a lot of fun, and we'll have you back soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Tate.
All right, joining us now on Through the Ringer, he is the Ringer's very own NFL expert. You can see him on the NFL Draft Show. You can see him on the Ringer NFL Show. You can find him on Twitter. His name is Benjamin Solak. And Ben, thanks so much for coming on the show, man.
No, I appreciate it, Tate. It's a fun time of year, man.
It's the best time of year because we have no games really to talk about. We have a lot of speculation to talk about. And obviously, once we get to the NFL draft, we have mock season, right? A lot of mock drafts. I want to talk about your mock draft, which I've seen is perfectly correct. A lot of people are saying this all over the internet. So congratulations to you for getting that done.
It's crazy. So many people, when they put out mocks, they decide to not make them 100% correct. I never understood that.
Right.
I'm always, personally for me, 100% correct every time.
Yeah, I love that. I love the accuracy. That's what the people want. They want some tried and true tradition there with your mock draft. But the question I really had for you was about the QBs, right? Everyone's talking about the quarterbacks, talking about the number one pick, my Carolina Panthers. What are they going to do with the number one pick? The last time we saw them there, obviously they got Cam Newton. That was a great time. There's a quarterback in the draft that's getting some Cam Newton comparisons. Obviously was at Florida like Cam Newton once upon a time, has some physical attributes. You really like him. His name is Anthony Richardson, and I want to start there. We're going to talk about the actual pick at number one, but what do you like so much about Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, I got Anthony Richardson no matter what written up on the board up here, right? A little draft day for you. I didn't know you were a Panthers guy. This is going to change my perspective a little bit. I got to be careful now.
Right.
With Richardson, when we talk about the draft, it's always very tempting to be like, okay, well, who do you have graded the highest? Who's QB1, right? And in reality, one of the things that we have to talk about, one of the frameworks we have to use is range of outcomes, right? A nice way of thinking about it is you have four top quarterbacks: Anthony Richardson, Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Will Levis. What if I came from the future? I told you every single one of them hit. All of them were hit the good end of their range of outcomes. Who would you like to have? The answer is unquestionably Richardson. He's 6'4", 240. He's one of the most athletic, if not the most athletic quarterback to ever come through the NFL Combine. He's a true dual threat in a league where the meta of quarterbacking is moving so much to mobility. He has a Josh Allen level arm, and he has like moments of processing. There's this myth that he's like a Trey Lance level prospect. That is not the case. He has some polish to him. He still need a little spit shine, got to sand out some of those rough edges, but he's getting there in terms of developing. And so when you have the first overall pick and you start looking at Bryce Young, who's a size outlier, and you're looking at CJ Stroud, who's a great prospect but limited mobility, and then you see Richardson and you realize, okay, if this guy hits, he's not going to be the 10th best quarterback. He's going to be a top 5 quarterback. He's going to be challenging Josh Allen, challenging Justin Herbert. He's going to be in that Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow tier. He's going to be among those greats. How could you want somebody else at 1? If you trust Frank Reich, if you trust the staff, to me, that's the direction that I would want to go. I'd want to take the big swing. In the NFL, we see it. Rookie contract quarterbacks. That's your winning window. I want a high-tail guy. I want a high range of outcomes guy. I want the dude with the ceiling. That's Anthony Richardson.
All right, so when you talk about the range of outcomes, and I think about this draft, I think about the greatest quarterback draft ever, right? 1983 with John Elway,
Classic.
Jim Kelly, right? 6 quarterbacks in the first round. And then I think about the bottom of the barrel, which is the 2013 draft with E.J. Manuel as the only quarterback that goes in the first round, right? So if we're looking at that as the range of outcomes in the spectrum, where would you put this class of quarterbacks? You mentioned 4 guys. I've seen some mock drafts that have 4 quarterbacks going first. We can talk about that and what that looks like. But how do you grade this class of quarterbacks if we look at that scale between the E.J. Manuel and the greatest class of all time? Are we somewhere in the middle, or are we closer to the 83 class?
We're closer to the top. You don't typically see quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3, right? It happened in 2021 when you had Trevor Lawrence into Zach Wilson into Trey Lance. It happened most recently in 99, which was McNabb, Akili Smith, and a third quarterback whose name I definitely remember. But you don't see it happen super often where quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3. This year, that's quite likely. You're going to see quarterback at 1. Very good chance you get quarterback at 2 with the Texans. So that's something that's been put into question over the last few weeks. And then the Cardinals at 3, man. I mean, the Cardinals, Adam Schefter tweeted out yesterday, the Cardinals have had 6 teams call them, trade up to number 3. Oh, the Cardinals just overwhelmed with trade offers. Please stop calling us offering trades for the third overall pick. The Cardinals want to get out of the pick, is the moral of the story. They'd like to trade it and have somebody come up and get a quarterback. I think you're going to see 3 quarterbacks go in the first 3 picks. Then there's the potential for quarterback 4 to go off the board for the Colts at 4. So a lot of need, and the quarterbacks are going to go really highly, potentially historically highly. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a good class, though. When you look at it, there's nobody I'm head over heels for. I know I just sang Anthony Richardson's praises, but a lot of that is a year away. Can you develop him? Everybody in this class, from Richardson to Young, Stroud, and Levis, is very likable. All of them look like NFL guys. Any one of these dudes was in the draft last year, they're going before Kenny Pickett, right? These are legit guys. These are starters. None of them, I think, are Trevor Lawrence's, Andrew Luck's, John Elway's. So we're a step below those classes where you're seeing guys at first overall who are like, yeah, like Hall of Famer, let's do it. But it's a very solid class, and I think you can get 4 solid to plus starters out of this group if everybody lands at a home that works for them.
Yeah, so let's talk about your mock draft, because you have quarterbacks going 1, 2, 3, 4, which I that jumped off to me, jumped off the page. 100% correct. So we have to dive into it. And number 1, it seems like a foregone conclusion to this point. It wasn't a couple weeks ago, but I feel like it is now, because we heard the story, right? David Tepper, he went into Nick Saban's office. He didn't have the GM in there. He closed the door and he said, "Tell me about Bryce Young." And apparently he was sold the bill of goods. Nick Saban said, he's QB1. You got to take him at number 1. He's special. They're calling him the Stephen Curry of the NFL in the future. All types of things, all types of exaggerations, hyperbole. What do you read between the lines there, and what do you see for Bryce Young, and why does it make sense that Carolina would take him number 1?
Yeah, so the Carolina timeline, moving up to 1 overall and then landing on the quarterback that they want to take there, is really important. It's a defining characteristic of this year's draft. Remember, the Bears previously owned the first overall pick, and coming into the combine and entering free agency in the middle of March, Ryan Poles, the GM of the Bears, made it extremely clear, I want to trade this pick now. He basically was saying, hey, I need to know if I need to go get a receiver in free agency or not. I'd rather trade for one. He was talking with the Colts about Michael Pittman, and he was talking with the Panthers about DJ Moore. So the Panthers, in order to get the first overall pick, had to trade with the Bears in early mid-March. They couldn't do it now because the Bears were selling the pick. It was going to be gone. So the Panthers made that move knowing that there was at least a dude that they liked enough to make him the pick. And that guy was CJ Stroud. When you go and you look at the betting markets immediately afterwards, Stroud jumped up minus 200, minus 250, minus 300 favorite to be the first overall pick there in March. But there's a month left of the process. There's all the pro days to go through. There's critically, as you brought up, the ownership meetings where ownership sits down with these players. They bring them into the facility. They take them out to dinner before their pro day. And they talk to the guys. And whenever the owners get involved, doesn't really matter who the offensive coordinator likes anymore. It doesn't really matter who the Northeast Regional Scout likes. Once the owners get involved, that guy's paying the bills. He's making the pick. And what you saw was after the Panthers went through their carousel of quarterbacks on their pro days, they went and talked to everybody. You started to hear some Bryce Young hype. You started to hear the Texans are preparing for Bryce Young not to be there at 2. You started to see the odds swing towards Bryce Young. And then over the last week, Young has dramatically overtaken CJ Stroud to be the favorite. He's now the heavy favorite to be the first overall pick. I don't think the hay is in the barn. I don't think he's the guy 100%. But as they went through their process, they knew, okay, we like Stroud enough to take him at 1, but we're going to go through this process all together. And when they did, they seem to have landed on Young as their guy. It's a bold swing. I think it's largely being driven by ownership and not the football operations, which is never super great. But hey, very successful player in Alabama. And there's a lot to like on his film. And so I don't fault them for making him the first overall pick. It's a hefty price to pay for a quarterback who's about your and my size. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I seemingly have bought in as a fan. You know what I mean? We try to do this as journalists, but as a fan of the Carolina Panthers, for whatever reason, I'm a Bryce Young guy. I want Bryce Young in the building. I think he's a winner. Jalen Hurts has even helped embolden that opinion of mine, which is probably insane. Mac Jones is not, but Jalen Hurts has. Sorry, Kyle. Kyle's over there. He's upset about that. Yeah, but in general, I'm a Bryce Young guy, so I'm excited about that. There's one other quarterback I wanted to talk to you about. I've seen a lot of people talking about him in the first round. Hendon Hooker, who America fell in love with this year before he got hurt at Tennessee. I saw him mocked on your mock at 24th. Is there a world in which Hendon Hooker comes out of this draft as the real winner in this quarterback group?
Yeah, I mean, the Hooker hype's been something. Holy smokes.
It really has.
You tell me, 25-year-old quarterback with an ACL injury, I'm calling you on day 3, brother. I think that it is even for the Heisman hype, even for the production, it's a surprising rise to see. Hooker's got NFL size, NFL measurables, NFL movement skills, and he's got a big arm, right? He's got a deep arm. And so he's checking a lot of the like general boxes, right? Okay, he's got like all this like nice big stuff that we like here in the league. I'm typically am hesitant around players who started to dominate at the college level when they were a couple years older than everybody else, right? Hooker's 24 this season with multiple years of experience, just dunking on like 19-year-olds. And like, yeah, I would hope so. Like that there was a similar sensation with Kenny Pickett at Pitt. Where like, all right, why is your only season as a producer when you have like a big age and experience advantage? It's a little bit of a red flag. And then obviously the injury creates a red flag as well. With that said, I mean, over 4.5 quarterbacks right now in the first round is like under plus 200. It's like nearing like a 40% chance implied probability. Like the Hooker hype is absolutely legitimate. He's been in to visit the Lions, who need a developmental quarterback. The Lions quarterback room right now is Jared Goff and Nate Sudfeld, which is to say that the Lions are not done adding at the position. They have 18 overall, right? So they have that pick in the middle of the first round. Vikings at 24 have met with him. They've got Kirk Cousins, 1 year left on his deal, didn't extend him. He's over 30. There's just a lot of teams, Titans, Ryan Tannehill, Commanders, Jacoby Brissett. There's just a lot of teams somewhere in the teens, early 20s who have placeholders at quarterback, and they're presuming not getting one of the top 4 guys because those dudes are going to fly off the board. If you made me pick right now, I don't think Hooker's a first-round pick because I personally can't get my head around it, but there's a lot of buzz about it, and I think that we're going to hear a lot more about it over the next couple weeks in terms of who likes him, who might trade up for him, so on and so forth.
Yeah, well, there you have it. He's a very bright guy. He's going to keep us up to date on all things NFL draft. His name is Ben Solak. And Ben, hopefully we'll get you out here to L.A. We can talk in person. We don't have to do this over Zoom. And the NFL draft is coming up soon. Stay tuned. Where can everyone find your work just so they can keep up to date on what's going on?
Yeah, Ringer NFL Draft Show. If you want more of that nonsense, We're doing it 2 times a week. Ringer NFL Show for the regular stuff. And then, on Twitter at Benjamin Solak. And we're doing draft content all the way through. It's the last 2 weeks where, like, everybody's just making up things now, right? We're just, like, lying and making up takes for fun. You got to entertain ourselves somehow. The draft should absolutely have already happened, but we're still waiting. So it's a good time out here in these streets.
I love it. Well, there you have it. Thanks so much, Ben.
Appreciate it, Tate.
All right, welcome back to Through the Ringer. And for our final segment today, we're going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to do some prop culture, which is a nice pun there, a nice play on words. And we're joined by Higher Learning's very own Van Lathan. Van Lathan, thanks so much for coming on the show, man.
Thank you for having me, Tate.
It's great to be here with you, man. And, we watched some college basketball games with each other during March Madness, got friendly, had some great conversations. And over that time, there's been a great TV show that has come on that I don't know if you've, we all know about this, obviously Succession. And spoiler alert, we're going to talk about what happened on Sunday's episode, the 3rd episode of this season. We have 7 more episodes left, but officially, and if you haven't seen it, change the channel right now before we get into this. But we have a Succession plan, and we have some Succession odds. Obviously, the name of the show is Succession. We know that this was inevitable. This was happening. Before we get into the props themselves, Van, what was your initial reaction when you saw Sunday's episode?
If I'm honest, it was a tough watch.
Right.
I'll tell you why. I'm not going to bring the podcast down, but this was one of the most realistic episodes of television I've ever seen. That call, I've gotten that call. Like, I got that call in real life, that call that, hey, this happened to this person that you love, your father. And like how you're paralyzed and you're wondering, there was one line in the show. It happened to me in 2021. I lost my dad. But there was one line in the show where Ken goes, what we do right now will be what we did when we got this news. And that's exactly the way you feel. You're like, gotta get together, gotta do it, whatever. Just an amazing episode of television. But Tate, one that I will never watch again. Never. Right. Look, crazy. What about you? What'd you think of?
No, I was going to say it's very like it's so human, right? And it was uncomfortable how human it was. And I thought like the dialogue that was delivered, the the I'm not sure, the stuttering, the no way could you really, conceptualize the reality of the moment. And I think that the amazing drama of the series is that, like I said before, it's so on the nose, right? The first season, Logan is sick. We have known that Logan has had health problems. That's why the whole implication was there of succession, right? That's why we've had all these conversations, all the jockeying for position, but it almost did not feel human when we talked about it, right? Obviously, like it was there, but this was the first time that there was the human element of this whole thing. And then, the elephant in the room with the whole conversation now is that we don't have the main foil of the show, right? I mean, that he is, Brian Cox, the actor himself, and obviously Logan Roy. Now it's everyone's like, what do we do? How do we pick up the pieces? And I think that was the other part. Not only did you grieve, as you were watching, as you make the personal connection for yourself, but you grieve a character that has been so, close to us, and we've had, even though he's the villain, right? He was one of the ones that we almost were cheering for. He was like an anti-hero of sorts.
Yeah, so you couldn't be more right. I think the show gets the opportunity to do something that's really interesting now. Logan represented so much of what that world came to be defined by. He represented the excess. He represented the power. He represented the allure of it. And just to suck him out of that world and then watch everybody else scramble and try to see, like, number one, if they even want to be him, and then number two, if they even could be him, is going to be an amazing journey to go on in these next episodes. Because remember, it's easy to look at Logan and go, okay, that's just kind of a messed up guy that has all of that. But once he's gone, all the structures that make that world possible still remain. And then, like, who's going to want to be that? Like, who's going to survive that? It's literally like when the king dies.
Right. And, I saw Andy Greenwald, one of our coworkers, made a great point. He was like, what is the universe without the sun, right? So we just took the sun out of the universe, and now we're all fumbling and trying to figure out what that looks like, which gets to our prop culture of the week, which is the succession plan for Waystar Royco. Moving forward, what does it look like? So I have some odds. This is how I set it in my mind for you, Van. So here we go. We're going to run through it. Kendall Roy, Roman Roy, Siobhan Roy, all at plus 250. I think that they have equal odds to take over right there, the family members. So I have them all there together as the favorites. Moving down, Jerry Kellman, who's obviously, was the interim CEO. She also was fired at the beginning of this episode, or was supposed to be, right? That was one of Logan's last wishes, right, for Roman to go do that. She's plus 400. We have Tom Wasgams, who is the chairman of ATN, who obviously became Logan's right-hand man, right, as things were unfolding there. He's going to be a plus 450. We have Frank Vernon, who he's been there for 40 years. He's seen everything. Long time, right? Yeah. Seniority's at play there. He's at plus 750. Speaking of seniority, we got Carl Mueller, who is the CFO, plus 800. He obviously is in that connected group. We have cousin Greg Hirsch, who's an executive assistant. Have him at plus 10,000. And then you can take all three Roy kids getting it together for plus 600, or you could take the field at plus 900. Where are you leaning? What do you expect to see in the fallout here? And this is kind of the crux of the show, and now we're going to actually see it all play out, which is insane.
Did you not even have Conor on there, or did I miss it?
Conor is not on there. He is part of the field, so you could take Conor at plus 900.
Oh, poor Con.
I think Conor might be the president, right? That's where Conor, his focus is on the presidency.
Yeah, Conor's not. He's not on the board. So yeah,
he's got to win Alaska, Van. He's got to win Alaska. Okay,
it's true. He's got to win Alaska. You know what? The smart money obviously is on one of the kids. It's interesting to me that you have the kids at all the same odds. What is the thinking there in all the same odds? Because I would say that they're even favorites amongst the three children here, the three Roy kids. You don't think that you wouldn't put maybe Kendall and Shiv as slight favorites over Roman?
I've worked it back in my head a little bit because, like, obviously at certain moments in time, and obviously Logan is not always a trusted narrator in the series, especially when he is,
right,
trying to set the kids up to turn against each other. So you can never really know where he curries favor. But he's told Shiv before, "You're the one I really wanted." He obviously has told Kendall, "You're the chosen one. You're the one who's supposed to take over." And then, at the end, right, he's calling him Romulus. He's got Roman. He's like, "You're the one that's actually on my side. I've always known that," right? So I just felt like Logan had kind of sprinkled, his love and affection pretty equally amongst them, and the fact that they are together theoretically, and we've seen them say multiple times, "We're in this together." I kind of think of them as a package, but I also think that it can break, obviously, because we already saw Roman tinkering on both sides of the line anyway. But that's why I had them even. Do you think that there is a favorite? Do you think Kendall? I feel like most people think Kendall is the favorite.
I feel like Kendall would be the favorite here. It seemed that Kendall took the reins in the immediate aftermath of Logan's death. The only question becomes, what has happened between the kids? Because remember, this is a much different group of kids than it was in the first or even the second season. There's this solidarity between them now. What has happened between them? And since they've formed their little unit, right, to go up against their father, and if that survives it, because, we have outside influences and stuff. I got to look at all of those people. So those underlings, of all of them, I think Tom is the biggest threat.
Mm-hmm. Plus 450.
Plus 450. Outside of the kids, which it seems natural that one of the kids would step up to the plate, I think Tom is the biggest threat. I would love it if it were Greg some kind of way, but I just don't think that member of the Discussing Brothers has done the groundwork to rise to the top of Waystar Rucco. But I think Tom is the one. I think he's the one you have to pay attention to, because it would be such a devastatingly swarmy, slimy thing for him to get to that perch. He's the perfect person to go to war against the kids, because he's adjacent to them, but not really one of them. He's also the perfect fall guy for the other people in those other higher ups, because maybe they don't want to step out in front. Maybe they want to have somebody that they can ritually kill in case things go bad. So if it's not any of the kids, which I think they're the glaring favorites here, like you have, I would say that Tom would be the one that I would have my eye on.
And if you watch the preview of the next episode, right, Tom basically says, "I throw my hat in the ring," and, Jerry kind of, negs him a little bit and says, like, "Here's all the reasons why you wouldn't be the guy." But again, we trust our narrators also? Do we trust the previews and things like that? So you would assume. I have a theory for you, which you mentioned, the Iron Throne, the king, right? I feel like there's a little bit maybe of a parallel connection between here and Game of Thrones. And I'm going to call this the brand theory, because it was so in our face that maybe we all overlooked it, and you brought him up already. But I think Cousin Greg, even though I have him at plus 10,000, I think there is a weird world in which Cousin Greg actually is the guy, because why else would he even be here? Why would Cousin Greg be a part of this journey for so long? Why was he necessary? Why was he, a part of this story? And I think weirdly, with the little sexual rendezvous that he had, right? And he told Logan about it. Then we see Logan go to this cafe where he's like, basically, "I don't have my kids anymore." And Greg's like confessing to him some of his close things that are happening to him personally. I feel like Greg is close enough. He is family. And I think Greg weirdly has learned enough from the slimy ways of Tom that there is a world in which maybe he ends up in the will as the one who takes over Waystar Royco, and he is the one who ends up being the successor. And then all of a sudden Tom has to suck up to Greg. That flips that entire dynamic that's always existed, right? Now Greg's his boss. And I'm calling it the brand theory because it might upset a lot of people, but it almost feels like it might be too on the nose and right in front of our faces. Am I crazy to think that Cousin Greg has a chance here?
No. You know what? Early on in the show, when the show was specifically about, the show became about a lot more stuff than just who was going to succeed. Of course. Logan Roy. It became about a lot of their interpersonal relationships, their problems, and all that stuff. But when the show was more directly about that, I thought, well, this guy would kind of be the guy that in some kind of way slides in there. And what we haven't heard from, who we haven't heard from yet, and I'm assuming that we will in the coming episodes, is his father, right? Who's had an estranged, very, very, very tough relationship with his brother. Or is his grandfather, should I say? His grandfather, who is played by James Cromwell, who's had that relationship with his brother. And so we'll see kind of what goes on there, like how that works and like what happens with that, because there might actually be a takeover or some kind of direct way that he could move up the ladder there. I think it would be very interesting.
Those are our succession odds. All right, final answer, Van. Who do you think is going to take over? Who would be your final answer right now? And you can change. We can always change. Things happen.
The worst thing about me is when it comes down to something that you know a lot about, which is the NCAA tournament. I'm a blue blood. I'm a top seed darling.
Me too.
So I'm going with the 1 seed, and that's Kendall Roy.
There you go.
Sure, could FAU get in there? Could George Mason ruin the Final Four? You know what I mean? Could you have a final game that only Tate watches? Sure. Like any of those things can happen, but I'm going with Ken.
I like that. I like that pick. And it feels like Kendall, he has obviously been groomed for this moment in time. And like you said, he took the reins over in the aftermath. I mean, he goes and gets Shiv, right? He kind of became the de facto leader of, the children at that point. So I think that's a great pick. I'm leaning Roman. I think that there's a world in which that Logan decides that Roman is going to be the guy. And I think Roman's going to think about it and say he wants all three of them to do it together. So I think all the kids are actually going to end up on the same side. And maybe they just take the money and go buy Pierce and do what they were planning to do right at the start of the season. So
anyway, for sure.
Yeah. Speaking of drama, this is drama not in a television show. This is drama on Twitter, which you and I obviously have to deal with a lot with our jobs. You and I are both on Twitter and see a lot of this. Right now, what's happening on Run It Back, basically, Spencer Dinwiddie of the Brooklyn Nets went on Run It Back today, which is a fellow FanDuel TV show. He was asked about Kyle Kuzma. He made some comments, and now Kuzma's doing a thread on Twitter. I don't know if you've seen any of this drama, but since I had you here, I just figured I'd ask you, how much do we indulge in these types of things online, and how much of this is just ridiculous entertainment? How much are you engaging in this content?
Tate, I love the bullshit. So this is the thing about the NBA. Football is king. The NFL is king, right? But the NBA is a unique package. It's essentially the Real Housewives with 3-pointers.
Yep.
It's literally like these guys and what they get into, and the fact that we get to know them so well. We get to know these NBA athletes so well. We get to know their personal dress styles. We get to know the women they date on a high level. We get to know all of the innuendo and the trainers. It's just a much more accessible game than any other sport that we have. And it also means that sometimes they get into these amazing spats. Who would have thought today that Kyle Kuzma and Spencer Dinwiddie will be going at it? And this is fun because what I like to do is that I like to go back and I like to watch old games. And I'd be like, yo, did he not give him that look right there because they don't like each other? Look him off. Look at him, look him off. Oh, they're not. I like to, and it just makes the game now. It's like you'll get a Christmas Day game where their teams match up because the league is messy. The league sees the beef and they see the drama and they go, you know what? We want to make sure these teams meet in the highest leverage situation that we can create. And I remember this back in the day. It was the Kobe Shaq thing, and then it was the Heat versus the Lakers on Christmas Day. And all that happened was poor, young Andrew Bynum got bullied by Shaq.
Right.
Remember that whole thing?
Oh, yeah. That was quite a moment in time because Shaq's like, I'm going to get my ring. And then he comes back home and Andrew Bynum, he got the worst of it. Like he was taking out his frustration on Kobe, but he took it all out on Andrew Bynum.
And so when I look at this is some real petty shit. This is they are really going at it. They're talking about each other's money. They're talking about how much people got traded. Look at this. Oh, in what world have you won in this league? You've been bounced around like a basketball, my boy. This is Real Housewives of the Potomac. This is like throw a drink in my face. This is like you done slept with every man in this club. You done bounce around like a basketball. That's something that Giselle would say. And I'm not even dissing Kyle Kuzma. I'm just saying this is the kind of stuff that on a random Wednesday when we got playing games tonight that like almost only the NFL can give you unless it's cornerbacks and receivers because they're the divas of their sport.
Yeah, I'm at the point where I feel like Andy Cohen should come in and do an NBA show, and it's like watch what happens live with Andy Cohen, and he sits down with Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook and everybody, and they just vent. You know what I mean? It's like Vanderpump Rules all over again. I think that's a great point. I love the drama. He is Van Lathan of Higher Learning. Where else can they find you, Van? Before we let you get out of here,
Higher Learning every Friday and every Tuesday, and of course the Ringerverse Pew Pew with the rest of my midnight boys over on the Ringerverse podcast feed. Thank you very much, Tate.
There you go. Appreciate you, Van. Thanks for coming on the show, man.
No problem, brother.